because I can apply the properties of mid-segments to solve problems. Now we're going to be talking about specifically mid-segments in triangles today. So these are going to be a little different than in mid-segments of parallelograms or rhombuses. So. Okay, so the first thing we're going to need to talk about is what is a mid-segment. And a mid-segment is just this. It's a segment that connects the midpoints of two sides of a triangle. Now, we are going to use a term here, midpoints, that we've talked about, but we have to have a complete understanding of for this to make sense. Remember, midpoint is the center of that segment. It's like standing on the 50-yard line. You have 50 yards one way, you have 50 yards the other way. Meaning, I'm standing at a point where if I look in opposite directions, the two segments are congruent. So if I look at this larger triangle here, and then inside is a blue triangle, it is creating mid-segments. And we can see that by the fact that these two segments are congruent. So this point right here, this point right there is the midpoint. These two segments are congruent with each other, but not congruent with the first two. That means this is a midpoint. Okay? So we can create a mid-segment from here to here. These two segments are congruent, so then we can create a mid-segment this way. Okay? So now, what does that allow us to do? Okay, what does this allow us to do? Once we have an understanding of what midpoint is, which we should have already known that, mid-segment, the triangle mid-segment theorem says if a segment joins two midpoints of a triangle, then it is parallel to the third side and half its length. Okay? Now, write that down, because this says a lot, but mathematically it's not hard. What the key phrases in there is that we've created parallel lines and it's half its length. Okay? So if I were to look at this, I know that this segment is congruent to this segment, so I've created point M, which is a midpoint. And this segment is congruent to this segment, so point N is a midpoint. Then that green line, I'll stay out of your way, or that blue line between point M and N creates a mid-segment. Now we can relate segment MN to segment AC. I'm going to pause it and then get out of your way. Okay, now let's talk about how this applies to what we have here. Let me move this up a little bit. Now, we've agreed that we have segment BM is congruent to segment AM. That was given. And so it created the midpoint M. And segment BN is congruent to segment CN. And that was given and created midpoint N. We've created mid-segment MN right here with the blue line. And I'm just going to highlight that right there with this arrow for the recording purpose. So I have that mid-segment. Now, let's read this. It says, if a segment joins two midpoints, we created this blue segment that joins two midpoints of a triangle. This is a triangle. Then it's parallel to the third side. So that means this is now parallel to this and half its length. So if I were to say segment AC had a length of 10, what would the distance of M to N be? No, it's half its length, so it'll be 5. Okay? Now, remember, you can apply that in both directions. If I were given the distance of M to N as 5, to get A to C, all I would do is double it. All right? So you can go half going backwards or doubling going forward.
Makes sense.
Okay, this would be number 1 in your book. So let's apply that mid-segment to what we're going to do in here. Now, the first thing I'm always going to do is determine whether I have midpoints, and that if I can connect those midpoints to create a mid-segment. So if I look at number 1 here, if I look at number 1, I've got, or I have, 2 congruent segments. So that tells me that this point right here, let's just call that point A, even though that's not in your book. Point A becomes a what? A midpoint. Okay? And I also have another pair of congruent segments. So we'll call this B, and that is also a what? A midpoint. Now, if I draw between A and B and create a segment, segment AB is now a mid-segment. So what's one of the 2 things we know about segment A to B, and we'll just call this C and D. What's one thing we know about A and B and C and D? They're parallel. That's correct.
They're parallel.
Now, that may help us down the road, so we have to keep remembering that. But it says find the value of x. The second item that we know is that A to B is in what relationship to C to D?
It's half its length.
Parallel, but it's also what?
It's half its length.
It's half. So if C to D is 18, that makes A to B what? 9. Okay? So on this problem here, it may be hard to see. This is a 48 here. Okay? So 48 and 2x minus 4 is this one here. It doesn't really look like that. I wrote it with my mouse. 2x minus 4. Okay? Now, again, you have to first decide, are these the midpoints? Yep. Okay? How do we know they're midpoints?
Because they're in the middle.
Because this distance is equal to this distance? Yes. And this distance is equal to that distance. So that tells us then that these are midpoints, right here and right here. So this is a mid-segment. So what did we learn about the mid-segment?
Where did you get the 2x?
That was given to us. That was just part of the problem that was given to us. Now the question was, what did we learn about midpoints? About mid-segments, I mean. We need to stop the talking.
We're learning about midpoints, and I think we said mid.
What did we learn about mid-segments?
The midpoints are always going to be in the middle of them, and they're always the same length, and right in the middle is.
A mid-segment, you're confusing
It's
some
a
issues.
segment that connects midpoints of 2 sides of a triangle.
Okay, and then what did the theorem say about the mid-segment?
If a segment joins 2 midpoints of a triangle, then it is parallel to the third side.
Okay, so it's this segment here is parallel to this one here. Okay?
This segment is parallel to this segment, and it's half as big. So how big is this segment going to be?
It'd be 24.
Yes, it's going to be half of 48. So we're going to say that 2x minus 4 is 1/2 of 48.
So
And some of you already said that's 24. So 2x minus 4 is going to equal 24.
Was that one of our things in the book?
Not necessarily, but it's like them. How do we solve for x then now?
you got a plus 4 to both sides and divide by 2.
Okay, we do the opposite of that, right?
Yeah, you plus 4 to both
Add
sides.
4 to both sides. So 2x is equal to,
28. Then divide that and x equals 14.
divide that by 2,
What?
x equals 14. Okay?
Okay, your assignment, if you choose to accept it,
That is horrible. Take something out.
it is.
Take
Now,
whatever you want out. I
What
don't
was
care.
that from?
Hey.
Anyways,
This is the assignment.
the assignment is 1 to 10 all, which we've already done a couple of these.
We should
12 to 18,
we should only do
12 to 18 even, and 29 to 32 all.